Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about the people, places, and organizations that shape Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee, there's a program that blends federal money, city agencies, and private donors to provide free meals for kids during the summer. Across the country, feeding kids during the summer often falls to nonprofits or school districts when school lunches aren't an option. WUWM education reporter Katherine Kokal speaks with Brandis, Stockman, and Justin Chu of the National League of Cities. Their conversation about summer meal programs is part of our series Seeking Solutions, Food Access in Milwaukee. They share how cities have approached hunger and why they believe it should be everyone's responsibility.
So Milwaukee partners several organizations together, such as the Hunger Task Force, which uses federal dollars that are matched by private organizations to do free summer meal distribution at 170 sites and more around the city. And so in contrast to how some other cities do it, where there are maybe a dozen sites or half a dozen sites in schools that serve meals, Milwaukee has really expanded that beyond to almost 200 sites. And the meals are free. Families don't need to register. They don't need to qualify. They do need to eat the meals on site, but those are offered at most sites Monday through Friday, multiple times a day. So free lunches or dinners or free lunches and snacks are distributed throughout the summer. And so I wanted to ask you two how this compares to other programs around the country and why city governments, like the organizations in the cities that you work with, view summertime hunger as a public issue.
I think that often people might see cities as being responsible for things like infrastructure, public safety, and things like that. But really, cities are concerned about, the health and well-being of their residents. We know that children that are hungry are more likely to struggle academically, to have behavioral challenges at school and just in general, and to have just in general poor physical and mental health. And if I'm just looking at the examples of the, academics and the school-based things, even though we know cities aren't directly responsible for overseeing their school districts, cities and mayors really care about the effectiveness and the quality and the services that are being provided by schools. Because generally, when you have a family that's looking to move into a community, one of the first things they look at is school. Are my kids going to have a good educational experience there? And if the answer is yes, then that's going to be a big motivator for them. And so when we're looking at school levels of academics and behavior issues, that's definitely something that cities care about. We also know that cities care a lot about workforce development, economic mobility, and we know that hunger can affect long-term outcomes. So if the youth are not being fed during the school day, if they're struggling in school, then it is more likely that they're going to end up on a pathway that doesn't necessarily result in long-term economic mobility for them, their families, or themselves.
Justin, I understand that you work specifically in the realm of the rising cost of living, and that is something that I've heard over and over again from families in reporting the story, that maybe things were going a little bit better a couple of years ago, but as the cost of fuel and food has gone up, that things have gotten even tighter, which has forced them to seek out resources like these. I wonder what you're hearing when you're talking to cities around the country about how they are reframing these programs and staffing these programs and providing resources in a moment when the cost of living is just making life so much harder for so many people.
Things that we've found for cities that they're exploring, especially in the space of limited or changing federal spending priorities, is really focusing on a whole human or holistic approach. And what that means in more simple terms is they're focusing on food access, but in addition to food access, they're building in wraparound services to support other types of benefits access, right? That could be something like utility assistance, or they're working with other community-based organizations to help secure things like healthy meals, food nutrition, and food education. These types of programs really help cities in a space where their budgets are getting tighter and they need to be a little more creative about their programming. So part of that is they are also focusing on building a program and portfolio that fits a more engaged city, really investing in part from their local leaders all the way down to their staff, showcasing that this hunger issue and childhood hunger is not, neighborhood by neighborhood or, person by person. It's an entire city, a full city and full community issue.
Yeah, I see your point too, that like when we're thinking about whose responsibility it is to look after children, I think some people argue that when the school day ends or the school year ends, like it's on parents. And as we're seeing, it's harder and harder for parents to actually make ends meet and make that happen. And I wanted to ask too about, in that vein, common misconceptions about who is hungry and what popular myths there are about child hunger and how cities can address that.
Yeah, I think some of the common misconceptions is that childhood hunger is something that only impacts specific areas or specific demographics. In those misconceptions, it is extremely harmful because it creates and reinforces stigma around accessing benefits that people need. Food and food access is part of our basic needs, as we may or may not know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In that sense, people from all walks of life may need access to these services. So these could be children of working families, they can be children of multi-generational houses, they can be rural families, they can be urban families, whatever it is. The children in those households need food access, and assistance programs help bridge that gap. And by creating a stigma or myths around who is accessing these programs, only furthers to alienate and delegitimize these types of programs.
I think we're also seeing changing demographics today because there are a lot of changes that are happening in the workforce. There are job losses in communities at a level that maybe some communities might not have seen before. Maybe AI is impacting the community. Maybe parents are getting laid off from their position. And obviously, these hunger issues for children are not issues that are focused specifically on children. Like there's a reason why the family can't afford food. And really addressing all of the issues that result in childhood hunger is the way to go. And cities are really uniquely positioned to be able to address those things. Something that we've seen really effective is community centers that are staffed with social workers. And they can meet with families, they can take referrals, they can meet with the families of the youth that might be participating in recreation or after school or summer programs and figure out really what those overall needs are. Because when you're able to address all of the issues that our families are being faced with today, that includes childhood hunger and addressing those issues that they might be facing too.
If you're just joining us today, we're speaking with Brandis Stockman and Justin Chu of the National League of Cities. Something that I've heard a lot in this reporting is that hunger isn't just about feeding kids, and it's not just impacting whether their stomachs are full, that this eventually grows into an issue that touches so much of our community. Brandis, what do you think of that?
I think children's food issues are an economic development issue, right? There's a reason why families are having difficulties providing adequate nutrition for the whole family, including their kids. And cities are very invested in workforce development. They're interested in attracting businesses to their community. They're interested in having their residents have a higher standard of living based on their employment. And when we see cities addressing that issue specifically, we often see a lot of success in those general basic needs just being met. So when cities have, financial empowerment classes, sometimes we've seen cities with entrepreneurship classes or bring in partnerships with banks to be able to talk with families about budgeting and planning out their income to be able to meet their basic needs. Those are other ways that can really directly impact the issue of childhood hunger, but also directly impacts a lot of other things that contribute to other challenges that families are facing today.
I think the thing I want to add is that childhood hunger and addressing childhood hunger is a full city, full community effort. So from your elected officials all the way down to resident groups, tackling childhood hunger requires a consistent investment in partnerships. The cities are at the forefront of this issue in understanding the different levers to pull and what connections need to be made across different organizations and stakeholders, and really gathering those disparate missions into one focus in eradicating childhood hunger.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this and kind of giving us a national view. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Brandis, Stockman, and Justin Chu work for the National League of Cities. They spoke with WUWM education reporter Katherine Kokal for our series, Seeking Solutions, Food Access in Milwaukee. You can find more reporting at WUWM.com. This series is brought to you in part by John E. Sorensen, Christine Simchich, and Jim McNulty.
That was the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast. It comes from your local NPR station, WUWM. Subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast to hear more great stories about Milwaukee.